But will you tell these fools I'm not crazy? Make them listen to me before it's too late!
Suddenly, while you're asleep, they'll absorb your minds, your memories.
It's a malignant disease spreading through the whole country.
Miles, where do they come from?
I don't know.
It's you! It's you! No, you mustn't go near it!
You can't get away from us! We're not gonna hurt you!
Get him! Get him!
The 1950s was the golden age of science fiction horror, from kaiju, giant monster creature films, which science became both the author of monstrous power unleashed upon mankind and its salvation. With the whole technological experience of the Second World War, in which every imagination of man was turned into unrestrained destruction, changed the world forever, and ushered in a new consciousness of the real dangers of science, thus making movies telling stories about threats as coming from without rather than from within us. Along with stories about disasters about being visited upon our planet from outer space involving alien invaders, that played on the West's Cold War fears of communist infiltrators, films about finding the monsters within society and within the mind of man. One of the most iconic from this golden age in film is Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1956. A stunning, frightening horror film adaptation about a small town population in California is being replaced by alien duplicates. The film is the pioneer of alien invasion movies, science fiction presented in its most horrifying form on screen, a prime example of economical filmcraft achieving maximum effect, and ultimately went on to shape the landscape for scary movies.
Whatever it is, whatever intelligence or instinct it is that can govern the forming of human flesh and blood out of thin air is, well, it's fantastically powerful, beyond any comprehension.
The film centers around a small fictional town in the Golden State called Santa Mira. Told from the point of view of Miles Bennell, the town's doctor, residents appear to be suffering from a mass hysteria. Certain people feel that their relatives are not actually their relatives, even though by all objective counts they are. Despite all his patients and others' dismissive denials, Miles, his former girlfriend Becky, and his friend Jack soon discover that the townsfolk's suspicions are true. An alien species of human replicants is taking over the town. What makes Invasion of the Body Snatchers such an effective horror film is its pacing. While it's the first half of the film is mostly the build-up towards the unveiling of the conspiracy, it nonetheless manages multiple issues at a time. It's important to build up the feeling of dread, of something lurking under the surface. It has to introduce and keep viewers entertained with the main characters, the setting, and stop audiences from getting bored while it's the slow, creeping menace snakes its way onto the screen. The film manages to do this excellently, with every scene advancing character, plot, and menace incredibly deftly. By the time the reality of the situation is revealed, you understand that you've been watching it all happen, possibly too slow to put the pieces together, and now it's all hopelessly too late. The story is told in interrogation flashback from the perspective of Dr. Miles Bennell with voiceover narration, which was a common trope for sci-fi movies of the time. When it comes to voice narration in motion picture, there has to be a right balance and restrained use of it, as this can get in the way of the action unfolding on screen, which itself is a visual representation of this same recounting of events by telling you exactly what we're already seeing. But the interjections only occur very briefly throughout the film, and is in no way overbearing to the point of telling you exactly what's going on or a character's personality is. The voiceover here gives a nice layer, complements very well the visual storytelling, while also adds in the element of surprise. Regarding horror movies, the main goal or common one is to scare the viewer. Most folks, when they talk about a good horror movie, is how good the scares are. However, what truly makes a horror film scary, let alone stand out, is great storytelling. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is more than a horror or sci-fi movie, it's a cautionary tale, presented as the ultimate battle about the fear of humanity can be here today and gone tomorrow, first on an individual level and then collectively. The film was directed by Don Siegel, which I'm sure is a name might ring a bell for some of you folks who made tough, cynical, sincere action-adventure films and crime dramas like Dirty Harry, The Shootist, and Escape from Alcatraz. And Siegel's use of realism, underpinned by the premise that the fear of loss of identity could happen to anyone, is what makes the film so unsettling. There are many moments of dread-inducing shocks that really make you process them in an emotional way, and those usually stick with you long after watching. A lot of horror films can be terrifying while watching them, but very rarely do they stay with you after they end, which is impressive. Not to mention, the film has very little visible horror with virtually no special effects or makeup at all. There is only one overtly graphic moment in the film's entire 80-minute runtime, and it's an event that has little to do with what makes this film scary. The film effectively conveys a mood of suspense, mystery, and danger, as well as paranoia, including suspicion, that ultimately drives the story, and it's implemented beautifully.
The mind is a strange and wonderful thing. I'm not sure it'll ever be able to figure itself out. Everything else, maybe. From the atom to the universe. Everything except itself.
Another really good quality about this film was the casting. The actors that populated the movie were solid, believable actors instead of household names, and the cast that was selected provided a grounded atmosphere featuring relatively newcomers in the main roles instead of big-name stars. On top of this, the characters are fully fleshed out, and the movie builds up familiar connections and relationships. Actors Kevin McCarthy and Donna Winter are both strong and make a great on-screen couple, and it not only frightens, it really hurts when the evil things happen. You connect with the realism, feel the terror and dread for these people. Kevin McCarthy was a solid character actor who never quite became a big star, but was a great lead here as Dr. Miles Bennell, a likable, smart, and smooth doctor who questions things as much as anyone. But something that's hard to explain like this: how could people literally be replaced without anyone else noticing? He wants desperately to believe this, but knows deep down he does not. McCarthy does a really good job showing that slow burn as he figures out exactly what's going on, and ultimately very brave and willing to sacrifice himself for the good of the future citizens of the small town. Donna Winter as Becky Driscoll is good in all her scenes. She's pretty, very smart, resourceful, and made of stern stuff, and despite being terrified, she holds her own. And the rest of the supporting cast, the ensemble as a whole, all do a really good job. On a technical level, the cinematography, editing, and musical score add immeasurably to the proceedings. Don Siegel's camera work and Race for Survival provide some very tense, eerie moments. From tilted shots, Dutch angles, odd extreme close-ups, the musical score does everything right. One could say the music is not too special, and it's typical 1950s sci-fi or horror flair, but it emboldens the film's terror and paranoia while never neglecting the story's human emotions or its psychological and sociological underpinnings. The music was composed and conducted by Carmen Dragon, who was lesser known for his film scores as for his work as a conductor and arranger, but he really hit it out of the park with this one, so much so that it was groundbreaking work, and it inspired many composers to use his arrangements and choice of instruments for suspense. Interesting of note, Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a compromised film. The studio that financed it did not like the original ending, so a prologue and an epilogue was added along with a voiceover narration. So Don Siegel and the screenwriter made the whole story unfold as if Dr. Miles Bennell is telling the story in flashback. The studio wasn't on board with the original ending, feeling that it was too dark and bleak, and insisted that the team write and shoot a more upbeat conclusion. Siegel's response to this was he just wanted to make a scary movie, and he succeeded. Regardless of the original ending change and additions made to the script, they all work very well. Kevin McCarthy is trying to warn others of this impending danger or tell people something incredibly important, but is never believed or simply ignored. And the film explores how many people dismiss out of hand for no good reason due to laziness, prejudice, stubbornness, etc., even as legitimate evidence piles up in front of them. As mentioned earlier, this is not just an alien invasion movie, it's a movie about the nature of belief, loss of identity, loss of self, loss of humanity, willful blindness, and how these things can happen to anyone. The breakdown of the authority figure, the terror from within the circle of safety, the infiltration by undesirable elements, and we must fight to keep our identity. Even today, the backbone of the idea is still very much something we should strive for. In other words, it's a film that reminds us to use carefulness and that freedom and liberty is something mankind must remain vigilant to protect.
You and I are scientific men. You can understand the wonder of what's happened. Now just think. Less than a month ago, Santa Mira was like any other town. People with nothing but problems. Then out of the sky came a solution.
I don't want any part of it.
You're forgetting something, Miles.
What's that?
You have no choice.
All that being said, Invasion of the Body Snatchers doesn't waste any time getting into the action, it doesn't skimp on telling a tight, economical, riveting story, it makes you think, and it sustains its disturbing atmosphere from start to finish. We start to learn what's really going on, and unlike most sci-fi and horror movies that feature a twist, this one works. Sometimes these genre of movies try so hard to really throw you for a loop that the twist comes across as laughable, but not the case here. As the characters' minds scramble to assess who's a human and who's not, the audience does the same, never quite being able to fully trust anyone in the film, and for good reason. To this day, the movie is still unsettling, mostly because it is so direct and so simple. It is also a movie that's been remade more times than it ever needed to be, but neither one of the remakes comes close to achieving the excellence of it, which remains one of the great paranoid nightmares of cinema. If you've never seen it, well, if you're the type of person who really likes to write or make films, you look to films like Invasion of the Body Snatchers as the example of how to do it perfectly.
Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!